tonight. Affordability and housing top the agenda for the big city mayors at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference in Regina. Also, as we move into Pride Month, people of color say it's not all celebrations, that racism and exclusion are rampant in LGBTQ+ communities.
We don't want other families to have to experience this.
The family of Megan Gallagher pleads for the public's help after a man accused in her case makes his first court appearance.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Thursday, June the 2nd, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Mayors from across the country are spending the weekend in Regina. They're here for the annual conference of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Affordability and housing appear on every government's agenda this year as Canada continues to emerge from a global pandemic. Alexander Kwan has more.
Now is the time for action on homelessness. That's the message from mayors at the opening press conference of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual meeting in Regina. Politicians from across the country are in town this weekend. Homelessness and housing affordability emerged as the focus of discussions. The conclusion? This is no longer just a municipal or provincial problem. This is an issue that transcends orders of government.
People don't want to hear about jurisdiction. They frankly don't want to hear about political parties. What they want to see is solutions.
Mike Savage is the chair of the Big City Mayors Caucus. He says the pandemic has accelerated homelessness across the country and established it as a clear issue that must be dealt with collectively.
When it comes to housing and homelessness, the feds have the money, the province have the jurisdiction, the cities have the problem. And so we all need to be at the table at the same time.
What that collaboration may look like is still being worked out. The mayors in attendance pointed to the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund, as well as conversations with ministers set to be held in the coming days.
Not unlike every other city across our country, the bringing more on stream and getting more built is actually paramount. We've been notified that we're going to start to run into a housing crunch more so here, and so really trying to get out in front of that.
Municipal officials in town this weekend say homelessness is a priority for them because it is a priority for their residents. Now, it's up to the provinces and the federal government to lend a hand. Alexander Kwan, CBC News, Regina.
A host of new gun measures are on the table in Ottawa, but the legislation is getting mixed reviews. Bill C-21 includes taking away firearms licenses from people involved in domestic violence or criminal harassment. It also requires people deemed a threat to themselves or others to turn in their guns. But a lot of people are pointing to the proposed cap on handguns, freezing their sales and transfers of them. Premier Scott Moe is against the proposed bill and calls it virtue signaling.
It is the product of many conversations that we had with victims and survivors groups, and I was very proud to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with representatives from Police Se Souviennent, Danforth Families, Coalition for Gun Control, and so many others who have been profoundly impacted in a way that is difficult to express into words.
The prevalence of firearms in our community has kind of spiked, I would say, proportionate to drug-related problems that we have and gang-related problems.
The minister says the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police is in support of the bill. It had its first reading in the House of Commons on Monday. There's been a break in the case of a missing Saskatoon woman. Megan Gallagher has been missing since 2020, but now charges have been laid. As David Shield tells us, her family is pleading with the public for more information.
It was an emotional scene in front of the Saskatoon Provincial Courthouse this morning. It was the first court appearance for 41-year-old Ernest Whitehead. Whitehead is charged with offering an indignity to human remains in the case of Megan Gallagher. A few hours later, police made a second arrest. 44-year-old Roderick Sutherland, seen here on the right, was arrested around Prince Albert after a tip from the public. The two other people, John Wayne Sanderson and Jessica Sutherland, are still wanted by police. The family just wants answers. About 100 people gathered outside the courthouse to support the family. For more than a year, they've been doing everything possible to find Gallagher. The 30-year-old went missing in September 2020, and police are treating her case as a homicide. However, her father points out no one is facing any homicide charges yet. Brian Gallagher says someone has to know something.
We don't want any more children going missing. We don't want other families to have to experience this. And the reality is, if you know something and you don't speak up, that's exactly what you're allowing to happen. So please, if people have information about any of the incidences, speak up.
The family has done everything it can to find their daughter, even buying a billboard to raise awareness. They've also put up hundreds of missing posters across the city. Saskatoon police continue to search for John Wayne Sanderson and Jessica Sutherland while the family sits, waits, and hopes for more information about Megan. David Shield, CBC News, Saskatoon.
The coroner's inquest into the death of Samuel Ugo finished with its last witnesses today. The 20-year-old was found dead in Wascana Lake 2 years ago. Earlier the same day, he went to the Regina General Hospital twice for a mental health crisis, but was forcibly removed. Laura Sharpaletti has the latest.
This week has been draining for Samuel Ugo's family, who wants to know why their son didn't get the help he needed. This morning, a witness testified that since the incident, things have changed at Regina General Hospital, but more work still needs to be done. The SHA previously blamed communication issues and a lack of clarity around Ugo's registration information for why Ugo was removed from the emergency waiting area. His body was found at Wascana Lake an hour later. Bill Perrell, the manager in charge of security at the hospital, says a few things went wrong during Ugo's hospital visits that day. He pointed to the fact that there is an unidentified patient protocol that wasn't used in Ugo's case. He says COVID-19 made things worse. The inquest heard from hospital security guards who said they were asked to remove people from the hospital if they didn't need to be there. This was done to maintain physical distancing between patients. Since Ugo's death, ER and security procedures have changed. Perrell said no one will be removed by security until they have seen a doctor. There are no exceptions to this rule. The director of the hospital's emergency department also testified. Desiree Nahachewski says 2 triage nurses will now be on the floor at all times. There was only one on duty when Ugo came to the hospital. She also confirmed a psychiatric nurse is present with the ER team and can get involved whenever someone comes in with a mental health crisis. And finally, Regina police cannot leave a patient in the ER without speaking to a healthcare provider first. Nahachewski added that more physicians on the floor would be helpful, as would diversity training. The jury is expected to begin deliberations Friday morning. Laura Sharpaletti, CBC News, Regina.
A new researcher has officially replaced Carrie Bourassa as the new scientific director of the Institute of Indigenous Peoples' Health. Last fall, a CBC News investigation found Bourassa had no Indigenous roots despite her claims. Bourassa was let go from the position last November when the false claims were brought to light. Today, a BC doctor was appointed as the interim scientific director of the Institute. Dr. Margot Greenwood says she has a lot of areas to focus on.
Self-determination, engagement, collaboration with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, organizations, and communities is my first priority in taking on this work.
The University of Saskatchewan has announced Bourassa resigned from her position as community health and epidemiology professor as well. The school says it's planning an investigation to look into her situation further and come up with recommendations to prevent it happening again. CBC's investigation found Bourassa claimed to be Métis, Anishinaabe, and Tlingit ancestry. Later, she changed her story and claimed she was Métis because she was adopted by a Métis friend of her grandfather. It's officially Pride Month in Canada, many people getting ready to celebrate. But some say more needs to be done to make the community a safer place for people of color. Pratush Dayal reports.
As a black transgender woman, Kissy Dury has experienced both racism and transphobia on dating apps.
Men on Grindr would say things like, no Asians or no blacks or whatever. It's as if kind of to say like, oh my God, this is something gross.
In some cases, it comes in the form of racial fetishization.
Certain races seem to be connected with certain body parts, like, being enormous and being attractive. So it makes you feel in a way that, Are you being identified based on just that very tiny criteria?
Dure posts about her experiences on TikTok.
And then to make it even worse, he said, my parents cannot know about us because it might be too much for them to take in.
While Dure uses humor to cope, she says the rejection hurts.
That was it was tough in a way.
Discrimination against LGBTQ plus people is well documented, but people of color say the intersection of their race, gender, and sexual identity make them even more vulnerable, even in their own community. Mirtha Rivera is a seniors coordinator at the University of Regina's Pride Center. She expected LGBTQ plus communities to be inclusive, especially pride organizations. But in the 3 decades since she came out as a lesbian, she says she has faced discrimination and prejudice within the LGBTQ plus community because of her Chilean heritage.
And you go to this queer group or queer community and you find that they welcome their own. They welcome not the color of people. They don't belong. We don't find our space.
Rivera thinks more queer people of color are needed in positions of power within the LGBTQ plus organizations.
In other organizations, we are not in the level of making decisions in the queer community. And in Saskatchewan, the law that I heard from other cities here, we're not there.
Both Rivera and Dure say while representation and education are key to improving feelings of belonging within the community, awareness and respect of the diversity within the LGBTQ plus spectrum would go a long way too. Pratish Dayal, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Flair Airlines is temporarily stopping flights out of Regina. The discount airline has been offering 2 flights a week to Toronto, but says those will stop starting next weekend. The Regina Airport Authority says this is the 3rd time the airline has come and gone from the city over the past 2 years. That's for reasons ranging from COVID-19 to aircraft orders. The Saskatoon International Airport says as of right now, Flair is continuing to run flights out of that city. We'll be back after the break. A mental health advocate in Saskatchewan has concerns with sports betting ads on television. Shauna Atroji worries about the celebrity endorsements when it comes to gambling, especially since the ads often appear during hockey games being watched by children.
I can say that there are things that concern us when it comes to youth and sports gambling. I think one of them is how socially acceptable gambling has become in our culture, but also to a further extent how socially acceptable sports gambling has become.
Sportsnet is in charge of the broadcast of Stanley Cup playoff games in Canada, including commercials. It won't tell us how many complaints it's received about betting ads, but it says it recognizes that sports betting content and advertising represents a change for audiences, and it's being, quote, thoughtful about the volume and content of the ads.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital GMC Buick Cadillac. The exclusive export event is back.
And Ethan Williams joins me now with a look at the forecast. What month is it? Can we establish the month?
You know, I get like 3 steps forward in giving you nice weather, and then it's like 5 steps back, unfortunately. And it's going to feel that way again tonight because we have a frost advisory in place, this time for the eastern part of the province. A couple days ago, it was for the western part. We have places like Regina and Yorkton, Kamsack, Kenora, Humboldt, up toward Hudson Bay, down toward the Moosomin area. And you could see some crop damaging or tree and plant damaging frost this evening. Now, pretty much all the south and central part of the province is going to be seeing some sort of frost, or has a risk of it anyway, but this will be the heaviest or the most damaging of the frost in that advisory area. But it won't last long because over the next few days, our temperatures are going to warm up because of this. Now, this is what is known as an omega blocking pattern, and basically our jet stream takes the shape of what sort of looks like the omega symbol, is why they call it that. And in between this high pressure system, we have these two low pressure systems, and it's called a blocking pattern because everything basically stays the same over the next couple of days. You watch as we put this in motion, and this Colorado low over Manitoba, the low off the coast of BC, basically doesn't move, but the high slowly moves toward us, and we are under this nice ridge of high pressure, and especially the northern part of the province going to be seeing some very nice temperatures as we head into next week. And I'll put our Prairie Outlook in motion here. And basically nothing changes because of this high pressure system. We have some activity off to our east and off to our west, but we are caught with some nice warm and dry and less windy conditions too, because it is very breezy, as we've known for the last few days. Gusts between 50 and 60 kilometers an hour out of the north and northwest. But as we go through the night tonight, those gusts will drop to basically nothing. And through the day tomorrow, they will be much lighter than they've been last couple of days. Gusts generally between maybe 20, 30 kilometers an hour. They could get as high as 40, but as you can see on both Friday and Saturday, really gusts won't be too much of an issue. We did get our crop report today. This is for the week of May 24th through the 30th, about 3/4 in the ground now. Now that is up from about half of crop in the ground last week. We should be closer to around 95% though, almost done at this time of year. And the west is indeed almost done. Places like southwest and west central looking at close to 93, 94% of the way. But for those of you in the east, southeast and east central part of the province, because of standing water, it is very likely that some areas will go unseeded this year. Now, the next couple of days in our forecast might help that, but for some it might just be simply too late. There is that pattern that's moving in that the next couple of days we get basically identical weather. 22s on the board for Regina both Friday, Saturday, sunshine, light winds, and then things get a little bit cooler as we head through the rest of the weekend and into next week. Cloudy conditions on Tuesday, maybe even some showers come Wednesday. And as we head in to Saskatoon's forecast, again, very similar situation, where we will see very similar conditions on Friday, Saturday. Could be some breezy conditions on Sunday. Winds won't get too crazy, maybe up to about 40 kilometers an hour. We see our temperatures close to around 20 on Monday, Tuesday. And Sam, you're wondering what season it is? Well, that 26 on the board there and the overnight lows above 10 degrees, that is feeling a little more like where we should be this time.
It's more than 5 days away, and I don't believe you.
Oh, well, I'll just wait and see.
Quickly want to put you on the spot. What are the things you don't have to bring in tonight if you've planted your garden?
If you don't have to bring in your tomatoes and squash, I think. I don't have a green thumb, but we'll go with that.
I think you just gave the wrong advice, but
I
thanks,
did.
Ethan.
You're welcome.
Today, Saskatoon Public Schools in Wanuskewin Heritage Park unveiled a new art and literacy project in the park. It's called Reclaiming Heritage. It was a student-led project, and its goal is to dispel stereotypes and reclaim the Northern Plains Indigenous heritage. Students were provided with a seasonal approach to learn through art and literacy with hands-on experiences. They unlearned, then relearned about the living history of Indigenous peoples in our community in the period before European contact. Stay with us. We'll be back after the break. Regular unleaded gas prices are closing in on $2 a litre at most gas stations in Saskatchewan. The cheapest you can find it is $1.76.9 at a few discount stations in Regina. We stopped by the pumps to see how customers are managing.
Well, it definitely costs us more money, and it's summer, everybody wants to travel, so it's hitting us pretty good.
I've had my sister move in with me, and she's got 4 kids, and they live, their school's across town, so we use like a quarter tank of gas every day, so.
Well, I think it's a little ridiculous with the way the prices are. I mean, people's wages aren't going up, and they're not going to have anything to, fall back on because of the prices. So, I mean, people are going to have to get rid of their vehicles pretty soon here.
I think you have to plan your trips accordingly, and it's one of those things you need gas, so you just have to reduce your spending in other areas.
Bring it down.
People are growing increasingly uncomfortable with how much it's costing them for a tank of gas. In some cases, people have already canceled their summer road trip plans after 2 years of not being able to go anywhere. So what is going on? For some insight, we're joined by Patrick DeHaan, the head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy. Patrick, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What is going on with prices right now? Why have they climbed so much in Saskatchewan?
Well, we've been seeing prices climb across Canada, across the U.S. A lot of this is happening, well, first and foremost, because of COVID. That is early on in the pandemic. Demand plummeted along with prices, and that caused oil producers to scale back. Fast forward to the economy reopening, demand started to go up. It started to outpace the amount of oil being produced. Then Russia came along and invaded Ukraine. That widened the imbalance between supply and demand and caused prices to soar. COVID also shut down about 5% of refining capacity in North America. We saw the loss of several major refineries because of that. And so now not only is oil more expensive, but there's less capacity to refine that oil into things like gasoline, diesel, heating oil, and jet fuel. And that's where a lot of the price increase we're experiencing is coming from, as gasoline inventories are declining to near record low levels.
So normally provinces like Ontario and BC pay significantly more than we do in Saskatchewan, but we're getting awfully close to similar pricing. Is there a reason for that?
Well, a lot of what we're seeing here in the prairies is because the market is tied to what the Rockies Mountains and the Great Lakes regions are. And we're seeing prices explode there on the other side of the border. And unfortunately, much of Saskatchewan is a price taker. Of course, we do have the refinery in Regina, but not a whole lot of insulation here from what's going on in the States. And that is that gasoline inventories, again, at least in the Midwestern United States, inventories of gasoline are at their lowest level ever for this time of year. And that's getting pulled into what Canada is seeing in terms of the high prices.
How bad can this get?
Well, that's the $1 million question. I think for now, Saskatchewan is, hovering just under the $2 a liter mark in terms of the average. I think it's possible that if any little issue arises, it's a matter of when, not if, we do see the province hit that $2 a liter mark. And we may stay close to the $2 a liter mark for a good portion of the summer, unless there's some drastic improvement between Russia and Ukraine or an economic downturn.
All right. Thank you so much for this, Patrick.
Thanks for having me.
Patrick DeHaan is the head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy. He joined us from Chicago. And Ethan is back with one last look at tonight's forecast.
And a little frosty, Sam. We're looking at a frost advisory in Regina. At midnight, we'll be at 7 degrees. We do warm up slightly at 8 a.m., 11 with sunny conditions. Look at those nice light winds, only just over 10 kilometers an hour. Saskatoon, we're at 9. Again, risk of frost. You're not in the advisory, but still could see some of that. Tomorrow morning, we'll hit 11 as well. Nice light wind gusts as well. Okay, time to redeem myself. Take notes, everyone. We have frost tolerance with our vegetables and what you're going to need to know. Carrots, peas, lettuce. Yes, they can withstand the frost, but if you got things like tomato and squash, they likely can't withstand it. So there you go, Sam, your official gardening word.
Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
And before we leave you tonight, a brand new mowing system has been installed at Wascana Hill in Regina. 60 goats arrived this week at the Goose Island Overlook. The hungry visitors will play an important role in protecting the park's ecosystem. In previous years, sheep were brought in to keep the grasses down, but turns out goats are much more effective at keeping invasive species at bay.
Goats are really good at this because sheep tend to eat grass first, while goats like to nibble on weeds. And what they do is they pick up the tops and eat the flowers, so the plants won't go to seed and won't spread anymore.
The goats will be on the hill for the next 10 days and will return again for another 10 days later in the summer. On average, the goats eat about 1/4 hectare of grass and weeds every day. They're certainly getting their greens in. That is it for us tonight. For News Anytime, you can always head to our website or subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel. Ethan will be back with more tonight at 11. We're back tomorrow at 5:30. Thank you so much for watching and have a great night.